Ever see NES games that look like this? Let's dive in. Here, 5 new NES facts you might not have known of before. This is a Famicom cartridge that allows for original Game Boy games to be played natively on your Famicom. The best way to think of it is like a Super Game Boy cartridge, but for the original NES. While this itself isn't an officially made cartridge, its roots actually lie way back to when it was being made officially through Nintendo themselves. This is called the Wide Boy, and was a device designed by the people at Intelligent Systems. These were designed entirely for behind-the-scenes purposes, such as developing and testing games on a large screen, or even retailers for display purposes. These were made for the Famicom, Super Famicom, as well as N64. However, here's something that was actually being designed for a retail release. This is the Biderman Design Labs Game Boy to NES adapter. It was initially being pitched to Comerica, but due to legal issues from Nintendo, never saw the light of day. Something that did, however, was Retro USB's Retrovision cartridge. Retro USB initially was known for their number of reproduction cartridge releases. Most infamously of all, however, was their Retrovision Game Boy cart. This is exactly what it sounds like, an NES cartridge that plays Game Boy games. They eventually stopped producing them, and it became a hugely sought-after device. This new cartridge that doesn't really have an official name or even packaging is essentially based around the same hardware and software as the Retrovision cart, but utilizes the expansion audio pins from the Famicom to create the authentic Game Boy sounds. Because of this, if you play one on your NES, you will have no audio, unless you're using an audio-modded NES, of course. But other than that, there isn't much to say. It's simply Game Boy on your NES. There are a lot of different color options that you can choose, and it features a really awesome Game Boy border. These have been popping up a lot online recently via AliExpress and other Chinese retailers, but due to legal reasons, who knows how long they'll be available for. Still, it's a really cool device in the family of doing something just to see if we can. The N64 was one of the first consoles to really popularize 3D video games, but is there a way to play 3D games on your NES? This is the Famicom FC Pico. This is a brand new cartridge made by a developer that goes by the name Impact Soft. Impact Soft has created a number of different homebrew titles for the NES and Famicom over the last decade. Not only that, but they have been designing various pieces of hardware such as Famicom cartridges, audio expansion adapters, and even flashers. Their latest project is a new type of Famicom cartridge that integrates a Raspberry Pi Pico microcontroller into the Famicom game board. By doing this, they've opened up a huge realm of possibilities for the console. The first and most advertised being 3D on the NES. Impact Soft had created a few pieces of demo software to show off the 3D capabilities. While I haven't been able to find many more examples yet, the included software is actually really incredible. Other developers who have gotten their hands on the device have also been experimenting with the capabilities of the FC Pico 2. A number of developers have added various audio experiences, such as external synthesizers, MIDI players, and more. One of the more interesting projects to come out of the FC Pico scene is a fully functioning Game Boy emulator, as can be seen here with the examples of Pokemon and the original Game Boy Tetris. Days are still early, as the device only released a few weeks ago as the making of this video, but there are some other really interesting experiments being shared online each day. Not only that, but Impact Soft is continuously working on software support as well as a next generation version of the device too. If you're interested, I definitely recommend following them on Twitter, X, to see what they're up to, or you can pick up the cartridge online and try your own hand at developing on it too. Do you ever wish that you could link two games together, just like a Game Boy could? Well, Bandai did when they released this Super Famicom accessory. This is called the Sufami Turbo. It's a micro-console accessory for the Super Famicom with a unique quirk of having 2 cartridge slots. The purpose of most micro-console expansions like this, the 32X or the Aladdin Deck Enhancer, is to make the manufacturing of individual games cheaper. Many of the necessary parts required to play are housed inside of the adapter itself, ultimately reducing the cost of each game. The Sufami Turbo, as you probably have already guessed, allows the 2 games to be inserted to interact with one another. The strange thing, however, is that not every game that released for this microconsole had this feature. If the cartridge had a 1 listed on it, there was no interactivity between games at all. If it had a 2, it could. Out of the 13 games released on the Sufami Turbo, 9 were able to link to other cartridges. The 6 SD Gundam generation titles were able to connect with every single title released. Boy Ninja could only connect to other Boy Ninja titles, and the 2 SD Ultra Battle titles could communicate with themselves. Ultimately, however, these interactions were extremely surface level and didn't add that much to the games. In the Gundam games, you could use fighters from the second cartridge slot, as well as the Ultra Battle games. And Boy Ninja simply shares data for versus battles. These games were all released before the time that Pokemon or Animal Crossing had come out, so interactivity between games was still in its infancy at this point. Sales numbers are unknown for the device, but it's almost certain that it didn't perform well, as the included advertisement leaflet showed Tetris 2 plus Bomb Bliss, but that game never released on the Sufami Turbo. Not to mention that all the games that released on the console were between June and September of 1996. These days, intergame connectivity is a massive thing, as online has made it super easy to share information, data, items, scores, and even play together. While this accessory may not have done it right, it definitely had its eyes pointed in the right direction. Why does this copy of Mega Man cost $90 and this copy costs $6,500? Let's take a look. The reason for the price difference is subtle, yet big in the eyes of collectors. This Mega Man copy only has 3 screws, and this copy has 5 screws. While this might seem like a really small difference, for this particular game, it's huge, as the 5-screw variant has only an estimated 80 to 85 copies in existence. These 5-screw cartridge variants were only produced from the launch of the NES up until around 1988, before Nintendo decided to switch production to the 3-screw cartridges entirely. They've never formally acknowledged the change, nor explained why, but it's speculated that it was made to reduce the cost of cartridges overall. Another reason could be for security reasons, as the switch to 3 screws also introduced a change to security screws instead of the standard Phillips head screws. There are a total of 88 different NES games that were released with a 5-screw cartridge, while most of them saw re-releases as 3-screw cartridges after the fact, and had significantly more copies made. There are 6 titles that only ever saw a 5-screw release. Most of these titles were valued around the $100 mark, with the exception of Stinger, which is a relatively cheap game. Every other game that was released in both 5 and 3-screw cartridges vary in terms of pricing. Some of these 5-screw variants have a bit of a price bump, while others are priced somewhat similarly. One of the reasons that they used 5 screws in the first place could have been to accommodate games that used this Famicom to NES converter inside of the cartridge. Excitebike and Gyromite were printed in excess for the Famicom, so at launch, instead of printing brand new NES boards, it was more cost effective to use a pin converter adapter. The middle screw fit perfectly through the Famicom boards and held everything snug together. So if you ever find yourself at a garage sale or a game store and see one of these 5-screw variants, you might want to consider picking it up, as it could be rare, more expensive, or have an extra cartridge converter inside. Everyone knows of the classic gray NES cartridge, but have you ever seen one with a screen built inside? Let's take a look. First of all, there are a lot of different cartridges made. The first and most well-known one is the Gold Zelda NES carts. These were a big anomaly, as officially licensed NES games at the time only released in the standard gray. These days, many homebrew releases come in all sorts of colors, not to mention the bootleg carts you can find all over AliExpress. Continuing in the land of unlicensed games, during the heyday of the NES, there were a few different cart variants, such as Tengen, Color Dreams, Camerica, and the Hong Kong versions, not to mention dozens of other smaller unlicensed carts. These days, homebrew devs and publishers are getting really creative with NES shell casings, as they've been exploring custom shapes and moldings, CNC wood-carved shells, and even unique styles for cart labels. One of the most unique carts I've seen, however, is from Retro USB. This is the 8-bit Christmas 2017 cartridge. For the 10th anniversary of the 8-bit Xmas series, they created an NES cartridge that has an LCD screen built in. When you choose the game, the label changes to the appropriate game. Not to mention, it's full of bright and colorful lights, as they've been doing for each iteration. Those were 5 pieces of NES trivia for you. Subscribe for more and stay tuned next week for more videos.